Like Rob just said, I'm going to talk about how to read your customer's mind and develop best-in-class products. There are 3 parts in this presentation. Part 1 is why giving your customers what they ask is actually a bad idea and how it will throw you off track. Second part is what you should do instead, including the magic wand formula. And part 3 is how to avoid overwhelm and become a mind reader. Now, a little bit about why I'm talking about this. So my name is Hanne. I'm COO for Thrive Teams. At Thrive Teams, we make conversion-focused plugins and themes. We have about 10 plugins, so as you can imagine, we get a lot of feature requests. We're on a 3-week development cycle, so every 3 weeks we release new features for these products. So we have to decide what we want to put in there, right? And that's exactly what we're going to go through in this presentation. Now, let's start with part 1. And you probably heard this expression before, and even Ali talked about this yesterday. So if I would have asked what my customers wanted, they would have said faster horses. This is Henry Ford saying that. And while Ali was using this to say that you should listen to your customers, I'm going to use this to say that you shouldn't listen to your customers, so that's fun. But actually, this is only one of the 4 types of feature requests that you will get and that can throw you off track. And when I mean off track, I mean that you have this roadmap in mind. And if you listen to your customers, if you listen to what they want you to develop, then you might get slightly off track of that roadmap. And maybe it's just 1 degree, 2 degrees, but as we all know, you can get really, really far away from your actual end goal by doing that. So there are 4 types of feature requests, and I'm going to go through them in the way that it's easiest to recognize that this is a feature request you should ignore, to the hardest one to recognize and why you should ignore them. So the very first one is the one I like to call the special snowflake request. So what's a special snowflake request? It's something like this. So this is from our support forum. We have one of our plugins, which is Thrive Quiz Builder. And this is somebody asking if we can add subcategories or something to Thrive Quiz Builder. Now, how to recognize whether something is a special snowflake request? Well, would fewer than, let's say, 1% of your customers actually use this feature. And very important, are those people early adapters or influencers? So I just want to put that in there because sometimes you can have a request that seems very niche or very little people would use it, but if the people that would actually use it are the ones that are going to advocate for your product, are the ones that are going to talk about your product, then it might be worth looking at that request. But if not, let's be honest, these type of requests, you should not be bothered with them. Read them, maybe put them somewhere in a corner of your mind. Let's see if you can get some more votes for the feature, but probably nobody will ever ask about them again, so you can simply ignore them. Like I said, we're starting with the easiest ones to recognize, right? So the second one would be the centaur request. So centaur, mythical creature, half man, half horse, and this would look something like this. So I would like to be able to send emails from Thrive Teams. Or this is probably one of my favorite ones. I don't like PayPal. Can you please make a payment processor? And so first of all, let me say it's actually really flattering to get these type of requests because it means that people really, really love your product. They don't love somebody else's product all that much or service, and so they would prefer that you actually make this. But the problem is it's not your core business, and you should not be doing this. So by looking at these requests, you can very easily say, yeah, we build WordPress plugins. We're not going to build a payment processor, right? The decision is pretty easy to make. Now, what can you do with these requests? You can put them in a Google document and save them for your next business idea, if you think that it's a good one. And which is a bigger opportunity for most software entrepreneurs, is you can actually find a service to integrate with. And you can solve this problem not by building it yourself. You should absolutely not build this yourself. But by integrating with a service that you trust and that you know will solve your customers' problems. So the third one, a little bit harder to recognize, is the wash a pick request. So this looks something like this. As a client, I would like to be able to use Grammarly in the text in Thrive Editor, our visual editor. And we don't get one person asking this. We have like multiple people asking for this feature request. And when somebody posts it on a blog post, it gets like upvotes and so on. Or this one, as a user, I want to reposition the Google CAPTCHA on my lead generation forms. Now, why are these wash or pick requests? It's actually the type of request that it would not make a difference in the buy or not buy decision for your customers. So nobody would buy your product because of this, and nobody would not buy your product because of this. And I could have said it's like the nice to haves. It's something that one day, maybe if you have too much development resource, this would be a perfect thing to do. Also, if anybody has too much development resource, please come see me and let me know how you do that. Because usually we have the opposite problem, right? So, and the other way that you can recognize this or that you can think about it is this something that people would talk about in product reviews? Because you might have people like reviewing your product online, and then is this the type of request that people would actually point out and be like, hey, you should use this solution over this solution because they have this feature, right? If not, then it's a wash or pick request. And what you can do with these requests is you can add them to your list of features. And because I will show you in part 3 how you can actually prioritize those and make sure that you develop stuff that's important for your client, you will see that these will never come up first on your list, on your to-do list. And then we have the fourth type of request, and this is the hardest one. So the faster horses request, right? And why is this the fastest one to recognize? The hardest one to recognize is because it actually makes sense. So when people request these type of things, it's because they have a real problem and they offer a real solution. So it would be something like this, like Eric has a problem with his buttons and he would like to copy-paste the formatting on the button styles. Or David, who's asking us for like group editing for elements. And what these have in common is that you have to ask whether or not this feature request is actually solving a bigger problem for your customer. And if this feature, if you would implement this feature, would this actually eliminate the problem? Now, the thing is, with the special snowflake request, the centaur request, and the wash or pig request, you can just get away with ignoring those requests. That's not the case with a faster horse request, because people are pointing out that there is a real problem that they need a solution to. So you want to satisfy that request. It's just not necessarily the way that your customers think about it, but you want to satisfy this request. Whereas the other three, you don't necessarily have to satisfy them, right? So what you want to do is you want to set aside the suggested solution that your customer came up with. And you want to identify what the bigger picture problem is. And then you want to make sure that when you implement the feature, it's not just solving one of those feature requests. It's actually solving a group of feature requests. So let's look again at those two examples. The bigger feature request is actually people telling us, like, I don't want to take the same action over and over again to style my pages. And our solution is actually a bunch of feature requests, which includes global colors and styles, and we call it smart sites. But this is something that nobody was asking about because they don't know that it's possible. Another example of this would be something like this. So again, we are very lucky that we have very vocal customers asking us a lot of things, giving us a lot of feedback. And here the problem is, I don't want to send my subscribers away after they signed up to my email lists. So I don't want them to go to a thank you page. Now, the things we came up with in Thrive Leads is these post opt-in actions. So these were suggested by our customers. Reload the page or give a success message. Okay, decent solutions, we gave it to them. But the actual powerful solution is a switch state solution, which is something that none of our customers asked for. But basically, it's our solution to this bigger problem. So a switch state is you can actually have another instance of your opt-in forms, which then allows to have social share buttons or a download button or anything that people want in that other state. And why I'm saying this is because this solves multiple of those requests that we got, and it's something that people were blown away with when we first introduced this. Now, because I'm a nerd, I made this little flowchart, and it just makes it easier to decide what happens when you get one of those feature requests from your customers. So this regroups everything that I just talked about. So it's, would it be less than 1%? Would those people be influencers or early adopters? In which case you would pay attention to this. If not, then it could be either the Centaur request or the Wash a Pig request. Now, let's be honest, sometimes there is this unicorn request that actually makes sense. Because some of the customers might be like you and me and actually know a product, think through the problem, come up with a better solution. And in that case, I said, hire this customer. But basically, like, try to get on the phone with them and listen to what they have to say. And so it might happen. I'm not saying that all the ideas are bad, but very often you will notice that it is not the case. Now, if you can't actually trust your customers that they will tell you what they want you to develop, then what do you have to do? Well, instead, you should do things that don't scale. Now, I know this is not sexy. This is not what people like to hear. It's so much more fun to send out a survey and then to look at those pie charts and whatever. But you have the advantage of being in this stage of business where you can either still do this yourself, the things that don't scale, or where you have somebody do this for you, right? So at one point, we wanted to test, we were working on the new visual editor, and what we wanted to do was see how our customers or potential customers interacted with different visual editors. So we went overboard. We created this website called Get a WordPress Editor. And the idea was that we would ask people to test different WordPress editors, and we would buy the one that they prefer. Now, nobody knew that Thrive Teams was behind this experiment because we actually wanted to get very unbiased data. We didn't want to hear that our product was the best, fairly the opposite. We wanted to see what people liked in other products. Now, it went something like this. Buy a domain name. No, this is going to be fun. This is way too small for me to read. Buy a domain name, build a landing page, then buy all the editors, test them on a website or put them on a test website, get Facebook ads, and then invite them for a survey, then contact those people, set up the live calls, watch hours of these calls, and then send an exit request, an exit survey, sorry, and then buy the one that they prefer. Now you can ask Dave, who's the one who conducted this experiment in the company. He spent 2 weeks of his life watching these type of live calls. It was not a fun thing for him to do, but it was super valuable for us to really get this information and to see what people were doing. Now, the reason that I listed this, and even like I'm forgetting so many steps, but the good news is you don't have to be that crazy. Like, you don't need 2 weeks full-time somebody doing this type of stuff, right? And We talked about it a lot, which helps me because I'm not going to go into that much depth, because customer development calls. So at this point, I hope once you saw our experiment that took 2 weeks, that you noticed that a customer development call is not impossible to do and it's not that hard. So first of all, I want you to take away that you should not overcomplicate this, and that yes, it is scary, but you should do it. So basically 6 steps to organizing this. First of all, send an invitation to your email list, on social media. Just get people to on the phone with you, to talk to you. We have this step where we have a little form to see if people are qualified. Now, if you don't get 100 requests, then you might not even need this step. Then send something like a Calendly link where people can just book their own time, so it avoids the whole time zone trouble. Send follow-up emails. So that's one of the things that you'll notice if you do these customer development calls, that people will just not show up or forget about it. So send a couple of follow-up emails, and then use something like TriCast, which is actually a podcasting solution, but it works really, really well for recording a customer development call. Or I saw that Skype now also actually has the function embedded in the product. And then, what do you want to do during this customer development call? And I'm so happy that Michelle yesterday actually did a talk about this, because this is my advice. Go back to her talk, her advice was way better. But basically, shut up and listen. You don't want to guide your customers, you don't want to talk, basically. The only thing that you're allowed to say is, tell me more. Oh, really? And you listen. Now, there is one question that I do want you to ask, and that's the magic wand question. Now, like I said, customers do have problems, and they will give you their feature requests, but they are not thinking about what they don't know is possible. So this magic wand request, which basically literally goes like this. If you had a magic wand, what would the solution to this problem look like? And this, the idea of asking them, if you had a magic wand, basically takes them out of thinking about what they know is possible, and getting them to think about what they think is impossible. And so at that point, you can get a lot of valuable insights about what the ideal solution would look like, and not just what a slight improvement to the problem would look like. So then what do you do after a customer development call? So right after, write down your gut feeling. Like, write down how did you feel about that call? This is a bit woo-woo, but I really like it, because then it can put context to the call. Second, transcribe, get it transcribed. It doesn't cost anything, and it will avoid that you have to take notes during a customer development call, which you absolutely don't want to do. You want to just sit there and listen. And then afterwards, because once you have that transcription, you can actually ask somebody else to listen to it, or you can listen to it yourself again, and then you can highlight the parts where you actually got the gold from your customers. So now at this point, you probably, or you should have a list of features. And we're gonna have a look at how you can prioritize them. So in the beginning, I had a way better title for this, but my slide did not get updated. So the boring title for this is how to prioritize new features. And your roadmap at this point, or your feature list, looks something like this. And you want to make sure that you make the right decisions, because as we all agree on is development resource, you don't have infinite development resource. And so you want to make sure that the features that you build first are the ones that will have the most impact and will make your customers happy. So this is what our feature list looks like. I tried to zoom out a bit more in Excel, I couldn't. So this goes on for many more rows. And I mean, the system doesn't really matter. Like, you might capture this in Jira or in Trello or wherever you want. The reason that we use an Excel or a Google Sheet for the beginning is because what is important on this sheet is this. You want to have a way to quantify or to give an importance to the different features that is not just, I like this, I'm emotionally attached to this feature. And in our case, so we have these 5 categories, criteria that we use to evaluate a feature. Now, for you, this might be other categories. There might be other criteria depending on your business. So the things that we quantify our features on is, will this increase our revenue? Yes or no? How much customer value does this bring? So will this, how much customer value does this bring? Then how much strategic value is this? And this basically means we are a conversion-focused WordPress plugins. So is this in line with the vision of the company? Yes or no? Efficiency is something that we added because there might be features that seem unimportant, but that will really help our customers use our product better. And so we thought it was really important to also give that a note. And then, is this an innovation? Is this a unique feature? So like I said, this is what we identified. This might look different for you. Now, next up, the next line is basically to make it a weighted decision. So if you, at one point, if you're like, we want to do a sprint to make our product more efficient, we could put, instead of having all of this weighted equally, we could put a higher note on efficiency, and it would immediately bring up the features that have that would improve the efficiency of our product. And then just give it a note from 0 to 5. This is very much a gut feeling. Don't overthink this. You know your product, you know your customers. On a 0 to 5 scale, how much would this work on the category that you identified? And this will give you this type of impact note. So the higher that number, the more impact it will have on your business. And then, of course, once you filter this and you saw the features that will have the highest impact, you have to see how this works with your resources, right? Because you want to make sure that you actually have the resources to implement this. Now, the reason that this is actually a really, really good exercise to do is because the features that you had in mind might not be the features that come up highest on this list. And because often we get excited about one of those 5 criteria, right? Like, it's super innovative. Yes, let's build it. But then it might actually not really increase your revenue, or it might not bring that much customer value, or whatever, or it might not fit your roadmap, right? And that's why having these different things will really help you to iron out and to make informed decisions. And you will get something like this, which I really, really hope so, where people are basically saying, you read my mind. This latest feature that you add is just so mind-blowing. I love using your product. I'm an advocate for your product. And the more you use this system, the more of this type of comments you'll get. And people will be like, hey, I didn't even know I needed this. Now I do. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Hanne. I have a question about the weighting process and specifically the workload allocation. Have you found that your estimates of how long it will take match up with the reality of how long things take? And if not, what is your mechanism for reevaluating that as you go?
So no, never. It's never the same. But it's very rare. So it's we go through this with our head developer or with like the CTO, and at least, of course, if they put like, oh, this is gonna take 1 day or 1 week, like it might not be 1 day, but it will give you that idea of will it take a lot of time or not that much time. So it's very rare that they would tell you it's going to take more than 4 weeks to implement this, and actually it's a 1-day task, right? So the opposite can be true, but but usually like and at this point it's impossible to give real estimations because there are no spec documents, there are no, like, that happens afterwards. So it's just looking at this basic requirement. It's gonna we'll have to change half of the code, or we actually see this should be pretty easy to implement. So it's more of a comparing apples with apples. So it would always be really wrong, but it will show you what's easier and what's harder to implement.
Thank you. Great talk. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about managing a public roadmap and sort of the implications of that. You know, when you throw a canny page up and suddenly there are 80 requests and you know you're never going to be able to build them all. How do you manage that with sort of customer expectations?
So to be honest, that's one of the reasons why we don't have a public roadmap, or because part of it is that people will always expect it to be faster than it will be. And so we only allow ourselves to be like, yes, this, like we're working on this if it's actually literally in development, which means that's going to be there 3, 6, or 9 weeks later. That's the only time that we publicly tell people whether or not something is in development. If not, we take votes. So we're like, hey, thank you very much for asking this API request. We're counting votes on that, and then it does help, like especially with integrations. Like it really helps to have that publicly available because it shows you which integration is most asked for. But yeah, after showing everything that I showed before, like we had one person being really, really, really passionate about having pagination options in our builder. And it was one of those things where just like every blog post he would ask for it, right? And if we would have a feature request type of page, like I know that he would upvote that request 150 times. Because that's what he did on every blog post, on every YouTube video that we put out there. So we have a few very passionate people, and even though it's a special Snowflake request. I think, like, yeah, we made the decision not to have a public roadmap exactly because we consider that our users not necessarily know the exact features that they want, and we prefer capturing their problems rather than hearing their feature solutions.
I had 2 questions. One is, they're sort of related. One is like, so a lot of the stuff you get in from customers is going to be not the best, or maybe not aligned, like you said, like three or 4 categories of stuff. How do you communicate with them, or if you communicate with them about those things, and like how you're either choosing not to do them or letting them sit? And then even for things you ship, like what kind of communication do you do to the people who ask for those things?
Okay, so we have about 40,000 comments on our blog now, so that for us is like by far the biggest way that we get feature requests and that we communicate with our audience. If people ask for one of those special Snowflake requests, it's probably going to be like, thank you very much for your suggestion. That's it. If we note, like, if we see that it's one of the faster horses requests, and so it's actually something that we're working on solving, if we recognize that it's the same problem that they are trying to solve, we might say something like, hey, we know that this is a problem. We had a lot of people like pointing this out. We are working on a solution. And to be honest, we usually don't say like, oh, this is gonna be in our next cycle or in the next iteration of the product, because the number of times where then that didn't happen and people feel super entitled and then they are disappointed because it's not in there. So like I said, like we only say we're working on it when we're actually working on developing it. If not, it's like, thank you for your suggestion. I added it to our feature suggestions, and we might get there in the future. And if it's something that we really are not planning on doing because we're not doing PayPal, for example, we just tell them, it's like, hey, this is not something we're planning on doing. So yeah, that's.
Do you have any idea how many feature requests you get in a given month? Is it hundreds? Hundreds, easy.
Because we have like the support forum, which basically our support agents click like, this is a feature request. It goes to the Jira board. That board is called Ideas, and that board has thousands of tickets in it. And then, yeah, like I said, like on the blog, every blog that we put out gets hundreds of comments, and it's especially if we have a new feature, people are very used to us asking, like, hey, do you like this? And what is something that you would like to see? Because we do want to have that communication with our customers. And yeah, the moment that we launched Global Colors, for example, I think that blog post has 300 comments, and it's mainly people saying like, I love Global Colors, but what would be really cool is if you added this, this, and this, and that. So yeah, we get hundreds of requests.
Any other questions? We have time for one or two more.
I was wondering thank you so much for a wonderful talk and taking all these questions. I was wondering if we could focus in on part 2 of your presentation, which was basically the customer development call,
Yeah.
right? And you talked about 2 tools that you use to extract data from the client. One is shutting up, and the other is the magic wand test.
Yes.
But those aren't the only 2 tools in the toolbox. Are there any others that you have found to be effective, particularly for the problem of getting from the customer what their problems, what their pains are, rather than specific feature requests, which is often what they're coming in the door with?
To be honest, I think the questions that, like Michelle went into the type of questions that you could ask. One thing that, and there are a couple of really, really good books about this. So, but one of the questions is just really being like, hey, you're trying to build a funnel on WordPress. What are your problems with that? And I think depending on where you are, and if you're looking on a more, like getting to get feedback on a specific feature, or if it's actually a full product, or if you don't know yet what you want to do, or like you might ask more open questions or more closed questions. It's literally just asking like, hey, what do you find complicated with doing this one thing? What have you tried before? Why did it work? Why didn't it work? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Those type of questions, and then being like, tell me more about that.
I was just wondering if you've ever had a feature you've launched that you've regretted, in the sense of customers just didn't use it, or it caused excess support requests or more problems or something like that. And I guess, how do you handle that, and do you have any filters for preventing that from happening?
I wish we did have filters for preventing that. I think for support requests, there's mainly if there's a buggy feature coming out. So that's what causes support requests, and that is in the testing process and the development process, and then going back to the drawing board and being like, hey, why did this get out? Like how on earth did this get on our master branch, and did this actually get launched to our clients? Now, because we have a WordPress plugin, unfortunately, it's very hard to know if people use certain features. So that's something where I'm so jealous of everybody who has a SaaS business, because I would love to know when people are like using our features and if it's actually like helpful. So that makes it really, really hard. And the third request was regretted. So the times that we regretted putting in feature requests is actually, or putting in features, it's when we solved a smaller problem, and then later on found a solution for the bigger problem, and now you have like these 2 competing things in your product. So an example of this is when we launched landing pages, which is years ago now, Thrive landing pages at the time, we knew that it was super important to have a lightbox on click show, and so because we wanted that in that product, we had like something that was called Thrive Lightboxes, which today makes that we have something that's called Thrive Lightboxes. We have like Thrive Leads, Thrive boxes, and it becomes confusing for the customers. And it's like, well, we know why we made that decision at the time that we did it. Today we regret, and it was a decision made at that point that seemed like the correct one, and now it's like, maybe we should have waited a little while. But yeah, that unfortunately that happens, and then sometimes you can make it as a legacy feature, so you can actually like take it out of the product, and it's like people who were already using it still see it. New users don't see it anymore. That can be a solution, or sometimes you just have to live with the pain.
I really enjoyed your scoring system for figuring out which features you should work on next.
Yes.
I've seen similar ones where effort was actually a part of the formula.
Yeah.
Why did you make the decision to sort of look at that after the fact rather than part of the final score?
Because we really wanted to get the features out there that would be most impactful for the product before starting to worry about how we were going to build it. That's the main reason. Like, we wanted to make sure that we didn't eliminate things just because they are hard to build.